everyone, we've recently been asked to paint a Spartan assault tank and some Dark Angels for a client. I thought this would be a really good opportunity to show some really simple and effective weathering techniques which don't take a lot of effort. Sometimes we don't need to go really far with weathering, maybe because we don't have time, or in our case, maybe because it just doesn't get seen. When I go to paint the exterior of this tank, I'll do another video on more advanced chipping and weathering, because obviously that's going to be seen. The paints we're going to use for this one are Games Workshop Ushabti Brown, Games Workshop White, Games Workshop Rhinox Hide, Scale 75 Black Metal, and Scale 75 Heavy Metal. Now, because we're going for a fast and efficient, good looking piece of weathering, we're going to use some sponge. Now, we used to use the sponge out of the Games Workshop blisters. They don't do those anymore. So this is some sponge out of an old army painter carry case. The idea is we're going to load the sponge up with the color that we're choosing and then unload it onto a piece of kitchen roll, and we're going to test it on our glove. We need to make sure we do it gentle. If we do it too hard, you end up with that monstrosity of a blob, and you don't want that. You want very, very small dots and marks. The priority with this is we're going to focus around the edges and any areas that might receive a lot of wear and tear, footprints like people walking across it, corners, that sort of stuff. Color choice is really important when it comes to this. Because we're using a sponge, we don't have a huge amount of control. So the idea with this is we're using a brighter color than the surface that we're painting, that we've already painted. The reason for this is, the idea is we need these chips to stand out. And we also don't want them to be too extreme. So the idea is that potentially the material that we're sponging that's chipped is dirty and over from age. And then where the scratch happens, it's scratching off a layer of dirt. So when you go with the same color, but just a brighter version, what you're doing is you're doing a very shallow version of the weathering. This is very light weathering. And this is really important. The order in which we do this, we always go from the lightest weathering through to the heaviest. So we're starting off with, this is a Ushabti Bone, and we're just painting like some chips on it with the sponge. Now what we're going to do, that Ushabti Bone is not going to look, you're not going to see it in the bright area because it's too bright. So what I'm using here is pure white. I wouldn't recommend pure white if you're doing anything other than the interior of a tank. Because this is the interior and it's really hard to see, I'm going more extreme. So if you were doing this as a Dark Angels, let's say a Deathwing tank, and this was the exterior, I'd probably mix a little bit of the Ushabti Bone into the white, just because white can be a little bit extreme. So this is the same stage, basically. This is the same as the Ushabti Bone, but we're doing a brighter color for the brighter area of the panel, because I've obviously got a gradient on that panel. Next up, what we're doing is we're going straight to Games Workshop Rhinox Hide, remove the excess, as always, test it on your hand or test it on a bit of kitchen roll. And once you're happy with it, what we're then going to do is we're going to do exactly the same. Now, what I would say is you need to be very careful with this. I've done a lot of chipping on this tank interior. The reason for that is because the interior of the tank, first of all, it's going to get a lot of wear and tear because you're going to have Space Marines that are walking over it all the time. But also because the interior of the tank is really hard to see because it's all covered and it's dark when you look into it, I'm going more extreme. And this Rhinox Hide stands out a lot. And this Rhinox Hide is meant to imitate much deeper scratches. This is where the paint has been scratched off completely and it's showing through the material underneath. You could objectively use a silver. The problem with using silvers is against bright colors, they don't really stand out, and you're going to see that later on. So we go with a dark color. Next up, I'm using Scale 75 Black Metal and Heavy Metal. You do not need to use these, but what you're looking for is a dark metal and a bright metal. I like Scale 75 metallics, so that's why I'm using them. So first up, what I need to do is I want the rivets to be silver, right? Anywhere you have silver, that means that not only like has the paint worn off, there's no rust build up, there's no nothing. It's just going to be really, really shiny. Gives off the idea that that's really as worn as possible. The problem is, like I said, if you put silver straight over any of these areas which have the Ushabti Bone, it doesn't stand out. And that's basically, you may as well just not do it. So with all of the rivets, I'm going over and I'm painting the rivets Rhinox Hide. The reason for this is it gives you a dark frame for when the silver goes on. So you can see, like, those rivets pop out quite a lot, and you could leave it at that if you wanted to. Once the rivets are Rhinox Hide, you're then going to go over with a scale 75 Black Metal and the Heavy Metal, and as you can see, the silver starts to pop out. It's actually visible, and it looks good. If you don't do that, it doesn't work. And you can see with this one right there, there's no Rhinox Hide on that. As soon as I put the silver over it, it's just not shown at all. Put the Rhinox Hide onto that rivet and then put the silver on it, and it pops and stands out. I know it's a really simple thing, but Games Workshop tanks, like Imperial tanks, have got a lot of rivets, and they're actually a really interesting, nice feature. So if you want them to stand out, put a dark color on them first, then put your silver. So when it comes to chipping, you don't have to go and highlight all of them. That obviously looks good, and that's something that will go on with a more advanced video, which is going to be coming in the next couple of weeks. But the idea is you're going through the stages of weathering. You're doing your lightest weathering first, your heaviest weathering last. You don't have to go all the way through to Rhinox Hide. Personally, I preferred it without the Rhinox Hide. I preferred it with just the Ushabti Bone chips. I thought that looked really nice, but again, I had to do more extreme because this is the interior of a tank. And this is what the interior of the tank looks like at the moment with all of the weathering on it. It looks really nice, it's really effective, it's really striking, and it's a believable result. That's what we're really aiming for with this, is believability. You don't want people to lose immersion when they're looking at your work. And not everything needs to be a masterpiece. We don't need to spend 10, 50 hours on every single model. We don't need to go around and edge highlight every single chip. Not everyone has the time for that. Not everyone has the patience, and not everyone has the skill. So this is a really, really simple process, and it looks great on all tanks. As a passing comment, I've shown you how to do this on beige paintwork. The Rhinox Hide will work on nearly any color, but on darker colors it doesn't really stand out as much. The main thing that you need to remember is when you're doing this chipping, you want a brighter version of the armor panel. If you're doing green armor, you're going to have a slightly brighter green. If you're doing yellow armor, you're going to have a slightly brighter yellow. If you're doing red armor, it's going to be a slightly brighter red. It's really straightforward and really simple. And that's it. As always, I'm hoping this has been helpful. I'm hoping it's been clear. If you have enjoyed the video, make sure you hit the like button and let me know what you think in the comments below. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see more from us. And if you really do want to support the channel, feel free to check out the members area for even more in-depth video content. Thank you as always. Cheers.